Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Keane, four-time best-selling author, online fitness coach, and nutritionist, normally here to help you by deconstructing expert guests on all things health, fitness, and mindset. But today's podcast is a Q&A, kind of like buses, when you're waiting for ages for a bus and then two come at the same time. I haven't done a Q&A in probably a year, and now two are coming back to back. Last week's episode was a little bit more on the fitness side, and although I do cover some questions here with fitness when it comes to nutrition, weight loss, sleeping after intense sessions and the cortisol response, I shift a little bit into mindset in the early stages of today's podcast. So a nice little counterbalance for those of you who've been following the podcast for a while or read any of my books, particularly the fitness mindset, where we go through fitness and we go through mindset. We're going to do a little bit of a flip in today's podcast, cover the mindset stuff early on and then go to the fitness stuff later, and it'll all be timestamped in the description below as well. And in today's show, we're going to talk about how to stop being negative about your appearance, hating your job but not really sure what to do, some life tips, weight that's always rebounding, not being able to sleep after late night workouts, and some of the confusion around carbs with every meal. Today's podcast is also sponsored by my Keane group coaching program. If you are looking to get into shape, you're looking to cover your mindset, your nutrition, fitness, the holistic approach for losing body fat, losing weight, getting in shape, building muscle, etc., check out the link for the Keane Edge program below. And let's jump into today's first question. Question 1, how do I stop being so negative about my appearance? This is something that plagues a lot of people, and I'm very mindful that one of the downsides of the fitness industry is that it can make and magnify and illuminate this issue because of comparison syndrome. Most of us by default tend to compare ourselves to other people, and the way that social media is set up, the way that the fitness industry is set up, it's very easy for us to be negative about our appearance purely because of that comparison syndrome that kicks in. And this is something you need to be very, very mindful of. I spoke about comparison syndrome in 2 of my books, Rewire Your Mindset, and also in Rewriting Your Story, that when you're comparing yourself against other people, it's instantly switching you out of focus zone into what other people are doing, and it can lead to a very negative association with your own physical appearance if you're not happy with your journey. Thankfully, though, there are some things that you can do that will help shift this. The first is setting a non-aesthetic based goal for a period of time. I've had multiple clients that I've worked with over the years who will get obsessed with the way that they look, either their body fat, their weight, or just how they're fitting in clothes or how they feel without clothes. And to a point, there's nothing wrong with this. I'm a firm believer as a fitness professional and just as a human being on the planet, I guess, that people should strive to be the best version of themselves. You deserve to look the way you want to look. You deserve to be in good shape. You deserve to have a lot of energy and vitality. That's a very important thing to think about, that there's nothing wrong with you for wanting to look a certain way. I've had to work on mindsets with people over the years who feel bad about trying to prioritize their body composition. They will literally say, I'm getting really strong and I'm doing well in the gym, but I'm a bit embarrassed that, I actually just want to look better. I want to lose a bit of body fat. I want to be able to see my abs. I want to be able to, put on my favorite dress. And I tell people there's nothing wrong with that. Having those aspirations, having those goals is a really good thing. Where it becomes destructive or detrimental or potentially a negative thing is when you become obsessed with your physical appearance. And one of the ways to break that cycle is by going into the gym or workouts at home or wherever you're deciding to move and exercise more, that you switch your focus in your training temporarily towards something that's more performance based. So what that might look like is a run, something as simple as a couch to 5K, a 10-kilometer run, maybe even a half marathon, full marathon, if we're using running as an example here. Just something that switches your focus from this is how I look in the mirror to this is how I'm performing, can start to split your attention from I'm not happy with how I look. Because when you train and when your goal is constantly focused on physical appearance, that is something that can actually hold you back because of the negative feedback loop of I'm just not happy where I am, and then you're moving through the world in a little bit more of a lower frequency because you're just not content with what you're doing. And switching the focus towards performance can help this. This is actually one of the reasons why CrossFit boxes, and they're not all created equal, some of them are absolutely dreadful, but some of them are very, very good. And one of the reasons that CrossFit boxes, or now in more recent times, High Rocks races, is gaining popularity because it's focused on performance. It's focused on weight, moving a specific weight or getting stronger. It's focused on times, reducing your time on certain WODs or workout of the days in CrossFit, or reducing your time in High Rocks. And then what happens is the body composition change comes because of the process. You're focusing on performance, running faster, moving weight quicker, or moving it in perfect form quicker in the case of, say, a sled push or a sled pull if it's high rocks. And that instantly means that you're not getting obsessed all the time with how you physically look, and you switch your attention to what your body can do versus how it looks. Now, this is a little bit of a sweet spot here, and it takes time. If you've been dieting or training for the last decade, constantly trying to lose weight, constantly trying to look better, this is going to take time. It's like a seed in the ground. I used this analogy in the Fitness Mindset, my first book, that changing habits are like seeds in the ground. If it's a new habit or a new way of thinking, it's like a seed in the ground. It's relatively easy to dig that up. If it's been there for a few years, it's a sapling, easier to pull out of the ground than a full-blown tree, but still difficult. And if it's been there for 10, 15, 20 years, i.e. the habit, and focusing on your appearance all the time is a habit, and it's the size of an oak tree, you're not going to be able to chop it down or cut it down overnight. It's going to take the process of several months, possibly even years, which isn't what people want to hear, but it can happen. If you've been focusing on your appearance and negative about it for the last 20 years, you're not going to change that in 3 weeks or 6 weeks. It's going to take longer than that. But similar to the metaphor, the analogy of cutting down a tree, how do you knock an oak tree? You hit it 1,000 times in the same spot. You keep focusing on the performance element. You keep focusing on alternative goals that aren't just appearance based, but you end up getting the appearance changes as a result of the process. So it's outcome versus process driven goals. You're not focused purely on the outcome of, I need to look better, I need to do more cardio, I need to lift more weights, I need to diet more, I need to control my calories, so that you're constantly chasing this dragon of body composition change, when sometimes it's just about shifting the focus and attention over to something that's more performance based, and then by process you end up looking better. I do this with a lot of people who get stuck in that trap of constantly trying to change their physical appearance, and it's not that they don't get the results. They do. It's just that you're getting the results from a different way. You're fueling it from a different source. It's like a car with petrol or diesel or gas versus electric. It's still moving in the same direction. The car is still moving, i.e. you're still moving and progressing. It's just that you're running off a different fuel. You're running off a performance-based goal versus a body composition-based goal. That's the first tip. The next one is look into your self-worth, and is it tied to your physical appearance? In Rewire Your Mindset, my second book, a very popular section that came back from a lot of fitness people in particular was the section on self-worth. And the story I told in that book was when I was competing in fitness model shows, where the criteria was about being leaner, being more muscular, making sure that you looked a certain way, a specific way. And in the changing room when I was preparing for the Worlds in Las Vegas in 2015, I had one of the guys say to me, man, didn't your legs used to be a lot bigger than that? And I remember at the time, so much of my self-worth was tied to the way that I looked. I was firstly so angry. After, I was like, fuck him. I was like, my legs are fine. And then it sat with me and it ate at me. And I spent the next hour, not even joking, not even exaggerating, to show how low my self-worth was and how much it was tied to my physical appearance. I spent the next hour looking in the mirror at my legs from different angles going, yeah, they did used to be bigger. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to be laughed when I go to this show in Las Vegas, and they're going to be like, that's the Irish guy with the tiny legs. This was the narrative of the unsupportive story that started to play in my head. And it was a little bit while later before I realized I didn't have a quote unquote smaller legs issue. I had a self-worth issue, and that I had so much of my self-worth tied to the way that I physically looked. And that is not a very good way to move through this world. And I had to look and have a difficult conversation with myself and look in the mirror and go, my self-worth can't be the way that I look. So many things can change my physical appearance. I'm going to get older, potentially could get injured, could get sick, and my physical appearance is going to change as seasons of life change. I need to get to the root of this. And for me, it was self-reflection, gratitude journaling, doing the self-work, the self-healing, the stories that I held and told myself about whether I was worthy of, talking to somebody that I found attractive, or whether I was worthy of just love in general. These were all stories that I had unintentionally written from myself that became narratives that drove the way I moved through the world. And I had to rewrite a lot of those stories, that I am worthy, and repeat that affirmation and use evidence that showed that I was more than just the way that I physically looked. And everybody, and you listening to this podcast, is exactly like that. You think that, and you can tie your attachment or your narrative or your story that this is who I am and this is why I'm worthy or this is why I'm not worthy. And if that story is not supporting you, it's time to rewrite it. It's time to change it in some shape or form, and making a list of all the incredible attributes that you have. Yes, maybe you're 10 pounds overweight at the minute. And if you want to lose that weight, brilliant. Work with a coach, work with a trainer, go through a program, move towards a positive direction of whatever it is that you're looking to make better in your life. But also know that it's not everything you are. You might be an amazing husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or father or son or mother or father. You have all these other things that are a part of you, and yet sometimes we get so locked in this closed loop of I need to look better, I need to look better, I need to look better. And that's not a very good way to move through life. And it's normally a feedback that there's a self-worth issue. If you've ever uttered the language or thought I'm not enough, that's your self-worth. That's the problem. So just make sure that you're solving for the correct solution, and it's not your physical appearance that's the problem. It's how you feel about yourself, your self-worth, your self-esteem, your self-love, for the lack of a better expression. These are things I go through in rewriting your story as well. My last book, 7 Habits to Help You Reclaim Your Power, Let Go of Fear, and Change the Narratives That Hold You Back. That might be a useful read for the person that sent in this question, but just keep that in mind too, that your physical appearance isn't everything when it comes to your self-worth, and maybe that's the problem you need to fix, not just your physical appearance. The last tip here then is audit your circle of friends. My mum had a great line that she used to always say to me and my sister growing up, and that was that if you lie down with dogs, you get fleas. And the other expression that you'll regularly hear is, birds of a feather flock together. And that means that if your social group puts an overemphasis on appearance, you may need to break from them for a while you go from 0 to 1 and work through that initial phase. When I was competing in fitness model shows, bodybuilding shows, I was spending a lot of time with other bodybuilders, other bikini athletes, other physique competitors. And because we had a mimetic desire is where you assigned value to something because your social group has assigned value to it. And I talk about this in Rewire Your Mindset about, do you even care about tennis is the chapter, which means that I have no interest in tennis, don't care about tennis. So if my best friend wins Wimbledon, I'm like, yeah, good job, go for you. But I have a mimetic desire for podcasting, for books, for social media, for business, etc. These are things that I've assigned value to and that are valuable to Brian Keane, the person. Whereas you might be listening going, I literally don't care if a podcast was high ranking or if a book was a bestseller. I have these problems over here, or these goals over here, or these desires over here. It's very important to understand mimetic desire, that we will assign value to the things that our social group assigns value to. And if you are in a social group that overemphasizes physical appearance, you might need to break from them for a while. When I was competing, I had to remove myself when I decided I was done with that world. After Holly was born in May 2015, I did the world in Vegas in August 2015, came 8th in the world in Vegas, and then I was like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't live this calorie binge restrict cycle, this shame, guilt spiral when I would binge on foods, the constant association with getting leaner and bigger that was making me obsessed. I was like, it's going to make me a terrible dad and probably make me a worse person. So I was out after that. But actually, to remove myself, I went training in a new gym temporarily. I spent time with other friends who didn't value fitness the same way that I once had, and it broadened my horizon. It allowed me to work through some of the things that needed to be worked through. But there's an old adage that you can't heal in the same environment you got sick in. And if this is something that you're struggling with because you're in diet circles or friend circles, we're always talking about weight, always talking about physical appearance, always talking about the way that they look, you might have to remove yourself from that temporarily. So there's 3 things that will potentially help you when it comes to how to stop being so negative about your appearance. Question 2, any tips on how to get through life? This is a dramatic question, I know. Yeah, I have a few things here. I think the best way to answer these questions are always advice you'd offer to your younger self. And I'm 37 now, I'll be 38 in December. And I think back to 25, 26, 27, 28, that kind of period of life. And when things sometimes felt difficult, sometimes felt meaningless, sometimes didn't really feel worthwhile, I didn't understand myself well enough. I didn't ask really good questions about who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. So I think answering this question from that place can be useful. I'll start with getting your ladder up against the right wall. This actually ties into the next question. That's a line that gets quoted back to me the most from my first two books, The Fitness Mindset and Rewire Your Mindset, about the importance of getting your ladder up against the right wall. In the fitness mindset, I spoke about when I was a teacher, and it's been like I felt like I had spent years climbing a ladder in a career only to feel like it was against the wrong wall when I got there. And I did 4 years of an undergraduate, 1 year of a postgraduate to become a teacher. I walked into my first teaching job in London, and I'd say within 30 minutes of a year 3 classroom with 30 children in front of me, I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. And the feeling at the time was, I spent years climbing a ladder and I am up against the wrong wall. And that happens with people in relationships. It's sunk cost fallacy as well, where you throw figures of good time after bad or good money after bad, i.e. you're in a relationship for 5 years, you've been miserable for 4, but you're afraid to get out of it because you spent so much time, energy and effort in it. This happens a lot with relationships. It happens a lot with diet protocols where people yo-yo diet. It happens a lot with careers as well. So the first thing here is get your ladder up against the right wall. If you're unsure about what the right wall is, the person you should be with, the career you should be in, the nutritional or training protocol you should be following, sometimes a process of elimination is the way to start, where you just start eliminating the things that you don't want to do. You eliminate the people you don't want to be around. You eliminate the careers and jobs you don't want to be in. So it starts by a process of elimination. So get your ladder up against the right wall is the first thing. After that, do difficult things that bring you peace or purpose. In Rewriting Your Story, my last book, I spoke about this, the paradox of doing difficult things. And I'm not saying do difficult things for the sake of doing difficult things. Suffering for suffering's sake is masochistic. Suffering for something that you feel inspired about is passion. And that's a very important distinguishment to make. Chris Williamson, the host of Modern Wisdom podcast, a great podcast. Chris has been on this show as well, episode 313, I think it is. And Chris has got a great line that not all suffering is valuable. And that's very, very true when it comes to difficult things. But if you're doing difficult things that either bring you peace or bring you purpose, I recommend you adopt that as a habit into your lifestyle. Things that bring you peace might be therapy. It might be meditation. It might be working out and moving more. Things that bring you peace. Working through, in my case, the self-worth issues above. That was really, really difficult. It's really hard to look in the mirror and go, you don't feel worthy. You don't feel worthy of the good things that happen to you. You don't feel worthy of love because of some childhood wound that you haven't worked through yet. That's a really difficult conversation to have with yourself, but it does bring a lot of peace when you're able to work through it. The same as purpose. If you feel called for something, and I've used the example of when I was working as a teacher and I wanted to become a personal trainer and set up my own fitness business. And there was times when I'd have to set my alarm for 4 a.m. because I needed to do my workout before I took a client in the gym at 5 or half 5. And it was really difficult. I'm not a morning person. I don't like getting up super early by design or by probably genes and biology. But I would always think, well, this is what I want to do. My ladder's against the right wall. I need to suffer now so that I can have a better life in the future. That's difficult things that bring you purpose. That's studying the course. That's studying with the mentors or the coaches. That's setting up a side hustle alongside your career and your job because you don't like it. That's suffering that brings you purpose. That's difficulty that brings you purpose. And as Jay Alderton, who was on the podcast in January, very good episode, his book is Hard Life, Easy Things, or Easy Things, Hard Life. No, I can't remember. Anyways, the mantra of the book is make sure you're doing difficult things, make sure you're doing hard things, because that gives you an easier life. And again, success leaves clues. So second thing here is do difficult things that bring you peace or purpose. 3, surround yourself with good people. Jim Rohn has a very famous line that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if you spend time with 5 fit people, you'll become the 6th. You spend time with 5 rich people, you'll become the 6th. Proximity is power in a lot of cases, but that also works in the reverse. If you spend time with most of your 5 people are all negative, it's very, very difficult for you to have a positive outlook on life. The analogy I used in Rewire Your Mindset, the book, was don't plant apple trees and expect oranges to grow. Don't put yourself in a negative environment and expect to have a positive outlook. And so that's why who you spend time with is so important. Audit your circle regularly. They don't all have to be the most positive Pollyanna, see the best in every situation, but they need to be supportive of what you're doing and you for them. You know, Charlie Munger's got that famous line, to get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. And that's the same with your friendship group. That's the same with your romantic partners. How do you get a really good partner? Make sure you deserve it. How do you get really good friends? Make sure you deserve it. And whatever that looks like in terms of how you show up in those relationships. But surround yourself with good people, because you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Then I would say do meaningful work. So much of our life is spent working. And in Habit 6, in the last book, I talk about learning to jump out of bed every morning. That when I was a teacher, every Friday I knew it was the weekend. Every Sunday I would get Sunday blues and I had to go back to work on Monday. And then I would be ecstatic around summer holidays, around holidays where I'd get a week off. That was, knowing now on reflection and hindsight, a feedback for me that this is not what I should be doing. You shouldn't be feeling these extreme highs, lows, and roller coasters in life in general. I would argue probably your relationships are the same, where that extreme high, extreme low, that's normally a feedback. It's an addiction in the sense of adrenaline and a cortisol response from a familiarity with, or a lack of feeling like you deserve something. You shouldn't be feeling these extreme roller coasters. And if you are, it's normally feedback that your path is not, or you're not aligned on the right path, or your ladder is up against the wrong wall. And doing meaningful work comes into that. It's an eighth of a lot of our days. For a lot of people, you'll sleep 8 hours, you'll work 8 hours, you have 8 hours of free time for the most part. I think that maths. So that's a large portion of your day. And if you feel like you're in a dead-end job or a career that sucks your soul, it might be worth tweaking or changing that. This is way easier if you're in the early stage of life where you're not tied, you don't have children yet, you don't have a mortgage yet, you can live frugally and cheaply and do things that you really want to do. This is a much more difficult conversation if you're in a different season of life. But if that's you, I would say try and find purpose somewhere. And in rewriting your story, I spoke about it in Habit 6. Either have an outlet for your passion, something that gets you very, very excited. So although the work doesn't feel like the outlet at the moment, there's another area of your life that makes you jump out of bed. Or if it's the case that you hate your career, maybe it's time to set up something on the side, look into alternative jobs, something that would make you happier. You don't have to make that decision or change in the next week, the next month, or even the next year. But again, it's the feeling of stuckness by thinking we're limited with our choices. And freedom comes from options. It comes from, I can make this choice and I can do something different. When you feel quote unquote stuck, particularly in work or job, which will come on to the next question slightly, it's because you feel like you have a lack of options. And that's the narrative and the story that you're stuck in. Once you shift from that and realize there are alternative things, and you go from I can't to how can I, and that becomes your internal dialogue, you'll start to see the universe moving around you. You'll start to see opportunities and synchronicities and things presenting themselves that is probably more in line with the path you're supposed to be on. So keep an eye out for that. And the last one then is just laugh more. Life gets so fucking serious. Like, learn to laugh more. And again, I know it's a bit of a paradox in this podcast because I cover quite heavy topics. You go through the reading list and scroll back on episodes, and there's episodes on trauma and inner child work and all this stuff that is really, really heavy. But outside of work, and again, that's what I love to cover in terms of topics because it's what helped me and helped heal me over the years. But just fucking laugh more, whether that's with your friends, whether that's going to a comedy show or watching something funny on TV, playing with your kids, relations, brother, sister, people you're close with. Just laugh more. It's not a coincidence that people will say that laughter is so good for the soul, because it really, really is. And again, a check-in from me is when life is feeling difficult, I find that I'm not laughing as much. And that's normally a sign for me to recalibrate, that I'm off path somewhere. My ladder's against the wrong wall somewhere. I'm misaligned somewhere, because you should be moving through the world with a lot more joy and laughter. So yeah, there's some tips on how to get through life. Question 3, I realized my ladder's up against the wrong wall, but don't know where to start. I think this builds on perfectly from the last question. And I would start and use the tip I gave originally. Make a list of, 1, what you would do for free. I think that's a very powerful question. You know, your life is really determined by the power of your questions and not the answers that you have. Smart people have great answers. Geniuses have great questions. Ask yourself that question and turn it back on you and go, what would I do for free? And then see, is there a way to monetize that? In the last book, Rewriting Your Story, in that chapter, I talk about kintsugi, which is the art of putting broken pottery, Japanese art of putting broken pottery back together to make yourself stronger, which is the core concept of the whole book. And then later in the book, I talk about the other Japanese term, which is ikigai. Ikigai is where you find what the world needs with what your talent is and where people will pay you first. There's like this Venn diagram and it's the thing in the middle. So ask that question. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a passion. Everybody has a gift. What you need to find out is what yours is. What's the thing that makes work feel like play for you? And it can be a difficult question to answer initially, but stick with it. Meditate on it. Think on it. Let your transient hyperfrontality kick in when you're in the shower, when you're driving. Those intuitions that come up, that transient hyperfrontality, that subconscious coming to the conscious. Once you ask the question, you start your brain, there's a lot of neuroscience around this, the brain starts to create paths towards the answer. Your reticular activation system is your brain's internal GPS. It's the part of the brain that where you say, right, I need to lose 10 pounds. You start seeing gyms everywhere, coaches everywhere, and it starts by making that decision. But then that transient hyperfrontality is when that subconscious comes to the front of the mind and comes to the conscious mind. That starts by asking the right question so that you're able to perceive or move in the right direction and in alignment with what it is you're looking to do. Asking the question, what can I do for free, allows that to come up. That's the first thing I'd advise. The second thing is the process of elimination and changing your perspective and doing the mental gymnastics on where you are currently. The good news is you don't like your job and you have feedback that this job in particular is not something you want to do. That's a gift and a very, very useful. In Rewire Your Mindset, I spoke about the trap of the it's okay syndrome, a relationship, a career, a program you're following where you're just like, yeah, it's okay. That keeps a lot of people trapped. It's not enough pain to move and there's not enough underlying turmoil to make you make different decisions or different actions or take different actions. When you hate something and you really dislike it, you tend to move out of it. And I would argue that's a much better place to be in than somebody who's just like, yeah, it's okay, where you're just kind of sleepwalking through life. And if you know your ladder's up against the wrong wall job-wise, make a list of other things that you don't want to do and see what you're left with. The combination between asking, what would I do for free? And then a list of things that you would not like to do, particularly things that you've already done, i.e. the job you're in currently. And then what's the next step I have to take? And a question I would ask, and it's a very woo question here, but it's one of my favorites, is who do I have to become to attract that? Who do I have to become to allow that to come into my life? Again, very simple question, very difficult to execute, but it's something I still come back to when it comes to writing books, creating programs, how I show up with people in my life. Who do I have to become to allow this to come into my life? What frequency do I have to vibrate at to allow this to come into my life, to let the law of attraction kick in, to let the universe give me what it wants, and then having the courage to execute when it does. The misconception with the law of attraction and the law of attraction without action is a distraction. Famous line from Rewire Your Mindset. But when you set your intention and shift your frequency to the point where you want to be and think, right, I want to attract this into my life, this person, this thing, this job, this career, this financial amount of money, etc. Insert goal here, this body composition. You ask, who do I have to become to allow myself to attract that? And then it's just about really getting out of your own way and then taking action when it presents itself. You know, somebody comes by in your life and you're like, wow, they're amazing. Take action with it. A career or a job opportunity presents itself. Wow, amazing. Take action with it. Have the courage, have the strength to move forward towards that, because it's very easy for you to get in your own head, start overanalyzing it and go, okay, maybe this opportunity isn't for me, or back to the self-worth I mentioned earlier, I don't feel like I deserve it. Then that's the problem you have to fix. When you can get to the point where your self-worth is strong and you feel like you deserve the good things that are coming into your life, the abundance that's coming into your life, you'll start attracting these things. But also you need the practical element of, what would I do for free? What's the things I don't like to do? Finding your ikigai. What's the thing the world needs that I can get paid for, that I can move towards? So keep that in mind, and hopefully that will help move you forward towards getting your ladder against the right wall when it comes to your job. Now on to the fitness questions. I'm female, 49, 160 centimeters, 86 kilograms, trying to shift 15 to 20 kilograms for years now. I lose a stone, gain a stone. Any tips to get weight loss boost for momentum? I think my ladder is against the right wall. Okay, I've got good news and bad news. First news is bad, and that your ladder is not against the right wall, i.e. your process for what you're doing is completely off. There's two real heavy red flags here, and I'm going to point them out here, and I hope it doesn't feel like an attack in any way. But the first is that you've been trying to shift 15 to 20 kilos for years. If you've been trying to do anything for years with no success, there's a very high chance and probability you're doing it wrong. The second is the rebounding of gaining a stone, losing a stone, which tells me that your growth process is very broken here, because that shouldn't be happening. That means that what you're doing isn't sustainable for you. So the bad news is your ladder's up against the wrong wall. The good news is it's relatively straightforward to get it against the right wall, but you may need some help with that, and that might be professional in the case of a program or a coach. You're going to need support somewhere, or even a friend group or someone who's very tuned into this side. But my gut tells me you probably don't have those people in your life, because you've been doing this for years without success. So you might actually have to hire somebody. So I'll add that here. And this isn't a pitch for me or my program or my Keane Edge or anything that I do. It might be somebody else completely. It might be someone online, someone one-to-one, but you probably do need professional help somewhere. So what I would look at first thing is your process. Weight loss. You know what your goal is. You want to lose 15 to 20 kilos. You are losing a stone and then gaining a stone back. So what you're doing right now isn't working, so you need to change the approach. The first way you do that is look at the big rocks, the big movers. And in weight loss, your big movers are normally sleep and nutrition. Training plays a role, supplements play a role, stress management plays a role, a whole host of other things play a role. But your big rocks for weight loss is normally sleep and nutrition, for two reasons. One, nutrition is your bedrock. It's your energy in, energy out. So if you're on a calorie control plan, ideally with nutrient-dense foods, good protein, healthy fats, complete carbohydrates, foods that you enjoy, plenty of vitamins, minerals, etc. So the calorie deficit that you're adhering to feels a lot easier to follow. If you can get that in alignment, you're going to start getting a shift in a consistent pattern. So if that means tracking your calories, track your calories with an app like MyFitnessPal. If it means making healthier food choices so that you're feeling satiated, then that's what I would do. I wouldn't leave this to intuition. I spoke in last week's Q&A in the last question about intuitive eating versus calorie tracking. Intuitive eating is an amazing approach for some, and it's a terrible approach for others. If you've been dieting for years and losing weight and gaining weight, you really can't do intuitive eating to start, because your intuition isn't tuned yet. It's not sharp yet. It will get better, but in the initial stages, you need something that's external that's going to keep you accountable, whether that's a coach or whether that's something like an app that's showing you, look, my calories are way too high. You have to hone that intuition. And if you're overweight, initially, you probably have a little bit of an insulin issue to begin with. So if you're insulin resistant or mildly insulin resistant, if you don't have a regulation of hunger or hormone imbalance, which I'll come on to now with sleep, your body's not trustworthy in terms of its intuitive cues, particularly hunger cues. Hunger, we assume, is something that we feel when our bodies are hungry, but that's not what happens. People feel and eat for a whole host of reasons. Emotional eating is a massive part of this. In the Keane Edge, Mastering the Mindset for Real Lasting Fat Loss, my third book, I spoke about it in the emotional eating section, that there's how to check in with physical hunger versus emotional hunger. And again, two very easy check-ins. Physical hunger is normally slow and gradual, and it's below the neck. Emotional hunger is normally fast, it's quick, and it's normally in your head or above the neck. They're just an instant check-in. So if you're sitting here listening to this podcast and you're like, am I hungry? You think about, when was the last time you ate? How fast did that come on? Did something stressful happen? That gives you feedback on whether it's emotional or physical hunger that you have. But we eat for a whole host of reasons. Some of us eat out of habit. There's the famous studies based on Pavlovian response, the Pavlov's dog, where you ring a bell and the dog would start to salivate, because every time he would give him food or give the dogs food, he'd ring a bell, so they start to associate the bell with the food. This happens to most of us with our work environment, all the way down to the school and education system, where we get hungry around a specific time because we know that's lunchtime. If you've ever had your stomach growling at 10:30 because you always have lunch at 11 o'clock, you get a Pavlovian response to hunger, and then hunger hits like waves, meaning that you'll normally eat around that time, but if you leave it and let it pass, that wave normally goes. I'm not saying to do this. This is actually not an advice strategy without accountability built in, with somebody who's allowing you to skip past that process and tune into that intuition, but just to give you an overall contextual idea that hunger isn't as straightforward as we think all the time. So what I would look into here is your nutrition overall. And the easiest way to get on plan with this is to eat regularly through the day. Again, I use the example of skipping meals and the wave of hunger, but for somebody that's been dieting for multiple years, or losing a stone, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, etc., you normally have to have some form of pattern, some form of routine with food. You want to make the right automatic food choice over time. So you build the patterns into your day, keeping your blood sugar level stable, etc. So what that might look like is breakfast, lunch, and dinner with some snacks in between. I would start with that, keep it calorie controlled, keep the protein high, the fiber high, so you're feeling satiated between the meal and you're able to stick to it. That's the first thing. The second is your sleep quality. With sleep, and sleep is still quite misunderstood in the kind of body composition and weight loss and fat loss realm, because what sleep does is it regulates hormones, and hormone balance is a very sexy topic, and rightly so. Physiology and how our bodies perform normally come down to the cues that are going on hormonally within our body sometimes. And I work with a lot of females, particularly in perimenopause and menopausal stage, where hormones feel like they're working against you, and it's just making sure that we're using the right plan, program, and everything's going to help with symptom management on that, all the way to men with low testosterone, where they're making the adjustments in nutrition, lifestyle, alcohol, supplementation, and training, so they're able to boost that naturally, assuming that they don't want to go on to a TRT or a testosterone replacement therapy. So what you're looking to do with sleep is optimize it, sleep quality versus quantity. And what that does is it regulates hormones, particularly things like ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone, literally sends the cue to your brain that you're hungry. Leptin is your satiation hormone, that you eat, feel full, signal goes to the brain, you can stop eating now. If you don't sleep well, they both become downregulated, and they're a very, very nasty combo to be downregulated. Ghrelin will just keep signaling, meaning you'll be way more hungry than normal, and leptin becomes downregulated, meaning that you'll be eating but won't feel satiated. And if you're trying to lose weight, that's a terrible combo to not be working in your favor. And you fix that in a lot of cases, assuming no underlying issue where there's a leptin resistance, etc., or any issue going on in your physiology that you need to fix in terms of endocrinology wise. But I'm talking a general healthy person here, where you're just trying to lose weight and you can't fix your sleep, and that will help it. Again, sleep quality more so than quantity. Working within your circadian rhythm as much as possible. Night shift workers, obviously this is going to be a lot more difficult for. I did a podcast with Tom Coleman, the sleep expert, on this. I'd probably check that out if you're a night shift worker. But for the average person working a 9 to 5 or working in normal daytime hours, sticking with your circadian rhythm, getting to bed by 10:30, 11 o'clock if you can, getting up at 6:30, 7, 7:30, whatever time it is, and trying to get quality sleep. If you need to use supplementation for that, if you need to cut out caffeine later in the day, if you need to adjust your meal timing so that you're able to have high quality sleep, that's what I would do. If you focus on those two things alone, you're going to start to get a shift in body fat and weight and a reduction over time. And then if you want to add on training on top of that, that's just going to speed it up further. Your cardiovascular training will burn more calories. I spoke about this in last week's Q&A, that you'll burn more calories, which will support your deficit. If you're weight training, that's increasing your metabolic rate, so you're going to be burning more calories while you're resting. That's the add on to it. And then your last 5% is just your supplementation. Are you using things like, green tea extract or L-carnitine or potentially a stronger fat burner to help support either appetite suppression between meals or increased energy in the case of something like a caffeine tablet or a caffeine drink, where your output is higher, your training is more intense because you're burning more calories or lifting more weight, which is further increasing your metabolic rate. These are all kind of things you can do that move in order of priority, but look at your big rocks first: nutrition, sleep, build training on top of that, and then supplementation last. Question 5. I really struggle to sleep after intense martial art classes. Any tips? Yeah, I have a few things here because this is relevant to all training late at night, whether it's five-a-side soccer, football training, going to the gym late, etc. What training does is you get a elevation in cortisol, a short burst of acute stress, which is a cortisol response. It's your physiology and getting your body ready in that not quite fight or flight response, but in a it's time to go, i.e. switched on, we're doing martial arts, you're playing a sport now, you need to be moving aware, you're lifting weights, you need to be tuned in. You get that increased awareness during intense or actually even moderate exercise. And what happens is it takes a while for that to re-regulate after training. It's actually one of the reasons why I really try not to train too late at night. This still happens when I play soccer or football if it's late at night, where I really struggle to wind down. The go-to here, and I generally don't recommend a supplement as a first protocol, but assuming everything else is right, you're not taking a caffeine tablet or a cup of coffee before your martial arts or your evening training session, you don't have a negative stimulant, or let me rephrase, an unsupportive central nervous system stimulant running through your system at nighttime. So I actually need to tell a story here to give a bit of context, because this was older Brian who was very, very stupid with this. So when I used to work as a teacher, I was in a school in West London, and I used to train in Muscleworks, which is a big old school bodybuilding gym in what was Bethnal Green at the time in London. And I used to be exhausted after work, after school. It was more mental tiredness. I didn't understand the difference between physical and mental tiredness at the time. So I'd be mentally tired, and I would take a pre-workout at about 5:30 or 6 o'clock before I'd go to the gym. and I'd have a great workout. I'd get a second wind. I'd feel amazing. And then I'd be in bed at 10 o'clock, half 10, staring at the ceiling. And what I didn't know at 22, 23, 24 was that stimulant was still running through my system. So when it was time to wind down and go to bed, I had caffeine and other stimulants running through my body. So I wasn't able to switch off. If that's you, eliminate the caffeine, eliminate the stimulants late in the day, because there's no working against it. You're not going to be able to, unless you take some sleeping tablet or something really, really extreme, which I don't recommend. You're not going to be able to work against that. But if you're just training late at night, the supplement I would go with is CBD oil. And this is life-changing. I started supplementing with CBD oil in 2018, and it's my favorite supplement still to this day for sleep. I use the extra strength 15% from Hemp Heroes. Now, full disclosure, I'm a brand ambassador for Hemp Heroes as well, but I'm obviously very biased because it's the supplement I use, and also I reached out to them to become a brand ambassador because I love the product so much. So I do have a code for it. It's BrianK10. I'll actually link their website below as well. It'll get you 10% off any order, and you can use that code over and over and over again if you're getting it, just because CBD oil can be a little bit expensive if you're using it regularly. But it's amazing. Like, it's when I play soccer in the evening, or if I have football training or something that's training late in the evening, I will take a little bit extra CBD oil, and that tends to balance it out really, really nicely. The only downside of CBD oil, which I tell a lot of people that I work with in terms of programs, is timing it right. Sometimes when you take it late at night, it means getting up in the morning is a real struggle, just because you're normally in quite a deep sleep. So my rule of thumb on an average day will be taking around 7:30 to be getting up at around 6, 6:30. If I take it later, I really struggle to get out of bed. And for someone that's a light sleeper, I have slept through alarms on it. Just be mindful of that. So your timing matters here, but it is something that can help a lot. But you need to experiment with the dose, experiment with the timing, but it is something that you can add into those evening sessions that will help, assuming you've all the other underlying issues fixed, like I mentioned, not having the stimulants too late, etc. Last question. In real life, I love that start to a question. In real life, can you have carbs with every meal? Working out in the gym 3 or 4 times a week, very confused with the messaging out there. Yeah, 100% you can. So carbohydrates are an interesting one because they get really demonized, and they're still, as much as I think I speak about it, other experts speak about it, you still get this confusion with carbohydrates more so than any other macronutrient. I think fat was the one that was demonized for most of the 90s, and I think now in the last decade it's been all carbohydrates. So it's really peculiar that we will demonize an entire macronutrient group when, macronutrients are just macronutrients. We've categorized them for our ability to label foods and be able to control for calories and know what different macronutrients do for our body, and carbohydrates are the one that are demonized at the minute. So I will say, I'll put this a couple of ways. Can you have carbohydrates in every meal? 80% of people who are training and moving regularly with no underlying insulin issue can have carbohydrates in every meal. Also, carbohydrates aren't all created equal. So there's simple sugars and there's complex carbohydrates, completely different. Brown rice and a packet of gummy bears are both carbohydrates. Brown rice has nutrients in it. It's got fiber in it, so it's going to be a slow release of energy. Gummy bears are going to be mostly sugar, glucose, corn syrup if you're in the States, even though I think that got changed recently now. I think they've switched to brown sugar, or they've gone to some other alternative ingredient. Again, don't quote me on that, but I know that they changed it up recently. But regardless, it's still impacting your body in a very quick way. It's giving you a quick hit of energy, quick spike of glucose, blood sugar elevation, very, very short. And then normally with a decline, which normally leads to people eating more sugar or more food because of that roller coaster ride of blood sugars. Both carbohydrates, so they're not all created equal. So that's an important distinguishment to make. But for a healthy individual with no underlying issue with insulin or a mild insulin resistance, carbohydrates in every meal are going to be fine, particularly complex carbohydrates. If you're training regularly, you also make yourself more insulin sensitive, meaning that your body is better at using the carbohydrate for fuel. Someone who's insulin resistant can eat carbohydrates. This is actually one of the reasons why overweight and obese individuals really, really struggle to stay on a nutritional plan even when they're eating good complex carbohydrates, because they're not getting the energy from that food. We can take it for granted as fitness people that you eat carbohydrates, it fuels a healthy body, it literally gives you the fuel that you need. Someone that's insulin resistant, that carbohydrate's not being used. It's kind of the analogy I've always thought of. It's like a bouncer on a door of a nightclub. If you're a healthy individual, that carbohydrate can shut it straight in the door, no issue. Bouncer moves aside, carbohydrate comes in the door, you get energy. Someone that's insulin resistant, it's like the bouncer closing the door and blocking it getting in. So it's just pooling outside the club. That's what happens with insulin resistance. So if you're in that category, you probably want to reduce your carbohydrate intake. You need to probably go higher with your fat and your protein for a period of time. Make yourself more insulin sensitive, assuming that you're not type 2 diabetic already, although you can reverse that. It's just considerably harder if you've already been diagnosed because of the extent and the spectrum in which you're on. But for someone who's already just mildly insulin resistant, going periods of time with a reduction in carbohydrates can make you more insulin sensitive, and then you can reintroduce it back in and you'll actually get through the door and use it for energy. So that's just a little bit of an aside tip here. But for a healthy individual who's working out multiple times a week, you're going to be fine having carbohydrates in every meal. So once you know what your goal is, if your goal is weight loss, body composition, etc., and you're controlling for your calories and you're hitting your protein targets, you're going to be able to do that with carbohydrates, you're going to be able to do that with fats, or you'll be able to do that with a combination of both. Carbohydrates aren't the problem, it's how you're using them, and it depends on your starting point. So for the majority of people, you're not going to have an issue with this. The other thing to add here is it depends on the intensity of your training sessions. So if you are going in and doing 45 minutes on a cross trainer 4 times a week, that's very different to going in and doing 4 high intensity metabolic conditioning workouts, hitting multiple body parts, compound lifts, etc. So again, coming back to the carbohydrates, if you're just doing steady state, low intensity, non-strenuous activity on a cross trainer, you probably don't need as many carbohydrates to fuel that. Yes, you don't need as many carbohydrates to fuel that. If you're training really intensely, you need the carbohydrates to fuel the session. In a recent episode I did with Rinny McGregor, which I'd actually highly recommend you listen to off the back of this podcast, we go through this in detail about who needs carbohydrates, what type, and when and where to include it, depending on if you're an athlete versus a general population individual looking to lose weight. But for the majority of people in real life, again, coming back to in real life, you can have carbs at every meal and it'd be perfectly fine, especially if you're working out regularly and you're just looking for that healthy, balanced balance. I think completely removing an entire macronutrient from your plan or having a demonizing viewpoint of a macronutrient isn't helpful for anybody. It really, really isn't. Food has no morals. Macronutrients have no morals. Calories have no morals. We project our morals onto it. Nutrition is about understanding the fundamentals. And I would actually also recommend maybe check out my nutrition course. I'll link that below as well. My nutrition course, which is a certified course, goes through everything you need to know about macronutrients, everything that you need to know about different diet protocols, and then how to apply it to your own life or with clients if it's the case that you're a personal trainer or a coach working with people. That might be worth looking into just because it cuts through the noise, it gives you the evidence and the research, and then you can apply it in your own life so you're not navigating the internet or navigating the world wondering what's right or wrong. And again, it's not a biased perspective. It's just here's what the science says, here's what you need to know, and this is how you include it if you want to include it. So I'd keep that in mind as well. That might be a useful follow-on for you. That's everything from today's podcast. So a little bit of a change in direction for this week's one. If you haven't listened to last week's podcast Q&A, check it out now off the back of this. And if you're new to the podcast, make sure you hit that like button. No, we're not on YouTube. This will also be on YouTube, Brian Keane Fitness, but hit that follow button. And if you enjoyed today's podcast or any of the previous episodes, please leave a rating and a review. It helps massively with the growth of the show and allows me to bring on some other great guests who can help you on your journey. I've got some really, really great episodes coming up over the coming weeks and months, so make sure you hit that follow button. That's everything from me from today's podcast, sponsored by the Keane Edge Group Coaching Program, which is linked in the description. That's everything from me, as I said. Catch you all next week.